here on religion. I guess I could bring us over there.
Yes. And you threw me off because there was no intro at all.
Well, I wondered if that song was going to be, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the. I was going to try to use it for an intro,
Okay.
but it was too long.
Okay. Well, welcome to um this Crooked River Radio special um show on religion. Uh do we have a link yet that I could share
For
the show? Did you
oh
share the
yeah,
link yet?
yeah, I was going to do that and never got there,
Okay.
but
So,
we can get
for
one.
those listening, I will share it to my Facebook page from the Rumble account. Um, but here we go. So today's show, as Pat and I both said, we're uh talking about religion. The show is titled
Diving in.
Crooked River Radio Special uh Diving into Religion. So we will now, without further ado,
Or I don't.
ask yes,
I do or I don't.
ask the first question. Should churches be able to tell people whether or not to live together before marriage? We'll jump in head first with this one. I think not, because they're dictating what you do with your life. I get that you're elevating the chances of temptation by living together, but if you're just gonna cohabitate, then there's no problem. But if you do plan to sleep together, and that's kind of assumed automatically if you're living together that you're intimate, but I don't agree. Um, what do you
Uh,
guys think on the question, and then react to the last part of it?
as far as, let me go first. I know Dale's chomping at the bit here. But as far as living together, I don't think that's the object here. I mean, that's not the objection. They're figuring if you're living together, you're probably consummating, and that's where the proof goes into the pudding, I guess, as you might say. As far as cohabitating, especially when you're younger, with no supervision, you're gonna consummate. That's all there is to it. And that's where the churches have come up with this business of saying you can't you can't sleep together. You have to save each other for the marriage night, and we object to that. Do they have a right to do that? Maybe back in Christ's time, but I gotta wonder what God would think or what Christ would think if they could walk on this planet again for a little bit and see the mess that's down here. You have people that just don't believe anymore. You've got some of your major religions have just went off the rails as far as trying to control the the population of their church. Do you have, it's up to you if you want, like I was saying previously, if you want to take and it's different if it's your first marriage. If it's really different because I agree to a point that there must be some, you want to save it for marriage. The woman should save herself. But on the other side of that coin, especially today, you don't know what you're marrying until you've spent a little bit of time with them. You don't know what you're marrying. The guy could be a
Amen.
beast. What's that, Dale?
I said, amen.
You could marry a beast. You could marry a woman that's 2 steps away from being psycho. You never know. So there's 2 sides of that coin. Where the following of this probably came from would have been that of around Christ's time, and back then it would have been perfectly fine, even up through the 15s and 1600s. It would have been terrific. You're saving yourself for marriage. But on the other side of that coin, like I said, nowadays, I'd want to live with. I'd want to know her for a year, then I'd want to live with her for a couple of months. Okay, hang on a second. You guys go ahead and talk. I'm being called away for a sec.
Okay. Where I was gonna go with this is not saying it's right, but the fact that society's changed when it comes to living together and saving yourself to marriage. Not saying it's right, just stating kind of a fact of what I've seen is that most don't save themselves. Most of the younger generation don't save themselves. Even if they're Christian, they don't save themselves. I don't know. What do you think there, Dale?
Well, that's blatantly clear. People haven't been saving themselves for marriage for a whole lot of years now. That ain't nothing new. But as far as your comment about, can a pastor tell you that you can't live with somebody before marriage? I happen to have personal experience with that. Okay, so it kind of hits home a little bit differently. Justine and I were engaged and moved in together. She was stripped of her position as a Sunday school teacher and more or less asked to leave the church unless she found different living arrangements. Now, if that's what their stand on things is, that's fine. But, I wrote a letter to the pastor and asked him, because sure, he's saying that, living together before marriage is a sin, which technically in your Bible, it's not. But do you treat every person like that in your church? Are divorced women asked to leave the church? Are women that have a child out of wedlock asked to leave the church? All these other people that have committed sins in the eyes of God, I guess, are they asked to leave the church? But yet you have an individual being picked on because they were cohabitating with somebody. Mm-hmm. You could make your suggestions to me, but I don't think a pastor has the role of telling me what I can and cannot do. That's between me and God.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, I just completely went blank on what I was going to say. Oh, jeez. Anyway, when it comes to, you mentioned divorce, and we go into what the off this topic, we'll go back to that in a second. What the Bible says is okay uh, for divorce. Like what what guidelines, lack there of a better term, are okay for divorce. Well,
I would like to see where that says in the Bible that it's divorce, because I don't remember ever reading anything like that, short of I'm sorry to interrupt you here, but
no, that's
but
fine.
short of death, betrayal, or
Idolatry.
adultery, or or just plain leaving. Those are the only things in the Bible that say that have anything to do with divorce. And the other side of that coin is the annulment. Most of the most common thing with stuff that is, as far as in respect to marriage and stuff like that's the annulment of the marriage, because the marriage, what the annulment says is that they should have never got married to begin with, and that's pretty much admitting it. And but coming down to it, it just annulment says that we shouldn't have never got married. We're sorry, and please accept our apologies.
But okay, I know it wasn't a popular thing back in the day, or at least people were less open about it. What about abuse? You know,
That was not any part of that, Eric. The
You got to remember, go back to biblical days.
abuse was not it had nothing to do with the right to be divorced or whatever.
but I mean,
Of course, you're talking the days where if somebody was caught for adultery, they were stoned to death.
yeah, or beheaded.
And even what's the one line? What's the one line that Christ said? Let he who is guilty cast the first stone.
Let he
Yeah.
who let he who is without sin cast the
That
first stone.
that's what I was looking for. Thank you, Dale.
Yeah, no problem.
But I mean, that's true. But at the same time, with, you know, in God's eyes, is getting divorced because of abuse, is that okay? Or is that a between you and God thing? You know, where's that line drawn? And personally, in my mind, and I'm not God, so maybe I shouldn't even say this, but I would think that's grounds for a okay biblical divorce. You know, if they're being mistreated and there's somehow proof, then biblically, I think the person has a right to leave the relationship according to what, you know, the Bible might say or says. What do you guys stand on that or think?
Well, you have to keep in mind here the laws of the United States and the rules in the Bible from 2,000 years ago well, actually over 2,000 years ago, are very different. Sure, yes, you don't see anything about abuse in the Bible, because way back when, if a man so chose, he could beat his wife. It was perfectly legal, and it was done all over the place. Now, we don't have that in our moral calendar nowadays, but back in, Hebrew times, that was done. You go back even as far as like into the 1800s. You hear of the rule of thumb. Well, do you know what the thumb rule actually is?
No.
The thumb rule was started legally. The rule was you could not beat your wife with anything with a larger diameter than your thumb.
Whoa.
So, and that's long after the Bible was written. So, you know, coming into our times now, yes, we look down upon that, but it was looked at differently. And I'm sure Jesus Christ would have had a problem with somebody beating on their wife, and he'd have said something about it. But you don't find anything like that in the Bible.
I
Also,
mean,
remember,
You don't find anything like that in the Gospels either. That's the weird
but
part about the.
but
In
you have to
fact,
remember how the
the
Bible was written.
the only thing that I've ever read through the through the Gospels that I've read has been the parable about what we just discussed. Let he who's without sin throw the first stone. And it's kind of weird because, but there again, as we said, that was acceptable back then. That was if you wanted to beat your wife, it was up to you. It was what happened behind closed doors. Maybe that's where a lot of this masochism has come from.
Too, and also, like I said, also remember how the Bible was not necessarily written, but put together. There was 100, 200 Bible scholars sitting down in a room having a big old argument about what writings and what particular books of the Bible were going to be allowed into the Bible and which ones they thought that maybe the people shouldn't hear or they disagreed with, and those were taken out. Like, for instance, Mary Magdalene had wrote basically a book of the Bible, but it was not allowed into the Bible. It's off hidden somewhere, probably underneath Vatican, where they have the vaults, and there's a lot of old writings there. If you've ever watched not National
I have
Treasure,
read.
other movies.
I've actually watched a couple of things on hidden hidden documents, and what the heck? There's a show on one of the alien channels. That's what I call them anyway. That was talking about the book of Mary Magdalene, the Bible of Mary Magdalene, and it does exist. I don't know where it's at, but it does exist. It's just not part of the current Bible, and it's not part of the Roman Catholic thing either.
Yeah, there's a out there. I've never seen it, and I should probably try to find it just so I could read it one day. But it's a book called The Lost Books of the Bible, and it has these different other writings in it so that you can see, like the Mary Magdalene thing that came up from that one Tom Hanks movie where they're trying to follow the bloodline of Christ. Shoot. Can't think about it now. But anyways, it's about following the bloodline of Christ, because it's some people have said that Christ was actually married, and he was married to Mary Magdalene, and that's how the movie went. Trying to think what the heck that was called. There's that other famous
I know what your movie you're thinking of, and I can't.
Yeah, I can't spit out the name now. Shoot.
I just sent you guys something in the group chat that talks about abuse and how God hates abuse of anybody and violence against women. It's in Deuteronomy 22:25 through 29. Let's see. The Ten Commandments condemn violence that or Old Testament law of Deuteronomy, punishment for violence against others, including sexual violence against women. Okay, that makes no sense. But that's what I just sent you guys. If you get a chance to look at it.
The movie was the Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, you're right.
And it also goes in, there's like 3 movies. There's that one, there's Angels and Demons. That has a religious background on it and why the bad things in that movie are happening. He's a symbiologist. And it's actually an interesting movie. But, at the end of the day, you know, I go by, what's in the Bible. But, it does make you go, because, Christ was to be a man and walk this earth. Why would it be far-fetched for him to have lived like a, human being and had a wife just like anybody else would have? And it's like they say in the movie, why couldn't he have been a man and be married and whatnot and still have done all the miracles that it is said that he did? It doesn't change who he is. It just says that the Bible tells you that a man should, take a wife and multiply, so if it's in the Bible that that's what God says you should do, why wouldn't his son do it while he was on the earth? Why not? It would make perfect sense, and it doesn't change who Jesus Christ was. Not a bit.
I know this is kind of a stretch, but doesn't the Bible say love your wife as Jesus loved the church? And kind of getting to the abuse topic, you're not really, by abusing a person, you're not loving them like God loved the church. Like I said, that could be a stretch, but, what do you guys...
Like I said, you're not going to get any argument about abuse being wrong from either one of us.
Okay.
The fact comes up that you said you found something. I've never been in a sermon where I have heard, like spousal abuse or child abuse even being brought up in the Bible. Not that we don't all know it's wrong.
And I hate to say this, but you'd probably never hear that in as a Catholic sermon. Because
Well,
if you think about it.
We'll shift away from that. Because I know where you're going, and no. Okay, go ahead, Dale.
No, I just said squirrel, got sidetracked.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay,
sorry.
yeah. Oh, we're good at that. Okay, well, I guess we can get into because this is a deep topic that could last a good part of the show. Has the devil taken over the world? I think that's how I had it worded, but in that being or meaning that are a lot of the beliefs of today controlled by the devil? Obviously, Christians are, they believe in God. We believe in God, and or Catholic. Any denomination believes in God, but the non-believers or people of the flesh, has the devil kind of taken a stronghold on them and really destroyed this world? Anybody?
We're thinking.
Yeah,
Okay.
trying to think how to go about it. Well,
Okay.
Satan has been in the world since you go all the way back to Adam and Eve.
Mhm.
That started it all. So you've had evil in the world since then. It's always been there. You always see it. There has always been sin. And do I think the devil has taken over more? I guess in a way you could say that, it kind of started when you took the Bible out of school, or you
Mhm.
took prayer, Bible, anything like that out of the schools. And, like for quite a while now, we've had a lot of things that at least you would see in the Bible being thrown down our throats by different government officials and whatnot that they deem to be okay, but the Bible will tell you differently. So I don't know that it's necessarily more prevalent. It's just, once again, you get into that whole thing with social media and the internet, and it's seen much more widely than it was before. But I think it's always been there.
Yeah. Has the well, I think you might answer this, but in this day and age with the internet, have we become has the devil been more prevalent? B- And
Oh, I think so. Yes.
yeah, like in just okay, let's use pornography as an example. You know, and that's against the Bible, or alcoholism. That's against. Well, I shouldn't have brought that up. Anyway,
As
or addiction. Let's go with that.
as far as well, let's take this back a little
You
bit.
can bring up alcoholism. I drink beer. Doesn't mean
Okay.
I love Jesus any less.
No,
I mean,
I just wasn't sure if you wanted to open up
oh,
about that.
I'm an open book, man. I'm an
Okay.
open book.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
wa- if
I,
you want
I
to
hold
call
no
him a
punches.
drunk alcoholic, you can go ahead. He don't care. He'll just have another beer.
You know,
Uh,
Pat, you can do that because you've known Dale for a long time. I barely know Dale, so
in fact,
anyway.
if it was if it came to anything, he'd say, "Here, hold my beer."
Done that before.
But as far as let's take this one step at a time through this. Back in the early, pornography's been around the world since probably the caveman anyway. You had you've always had to a point
Some
you've
sort of it.
always had brothels. Hell, the Romans had brothels that has been proved that they had steam houses and brothels and everything else. And then even if you look at Sodom and Gomorrah, if God was supposed to have he was supposed to have destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah because of the the no, I don't want to call it pornography, but because of the abuse that was going on there. The bad things that were going on there. And part of it had to do with the nudity and everything like that, from what I took out of it anyway. So
But
you've always had that stuff in the world.
it's more
It's just
accessible.
gotten a lot worse. When you back in even the 60s and early 70s, 80s, before computers came along, the only you could you could go down to your local Lawson store and walk in and buy yourself a issue of Penthouse magazine and see nudity to a point, but
Yeah, I noticed they don't sell those at the gas stations anymore.
it was never because all those magazines have went out. They've either went to electronic print or they've went out of business. Hell, look at what I remember everywhere they had Playboy. Find a Playboy around here now. Yeah, it's the stuff has been there, but it's never been as prevalent as it has today. Hell, you can go to the internet, type in Pornhub.com, and see all that you want to ever see. And, you know, it's somebody doing that. It's so much more prevalent there, so much
And
more available. Is that the devil behind? Is that the devil causing that? Uh, I
the
I
the
hate to
devil causing that temptation.
I
Yeah.
hate to say this, but I think it's more than the devil. I think it's the root of all evil, which is money.
Well, yeah. That, as we know, that's the most. That's the biggest industry in the world.
And pornography is, yes.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Pornography is the biggest industry in the world, and it has
Not
been
saying
for a
it's right,
long
but it
time.
is. Yeah.
And the more and more it becomes available, the worse it gets.
I mean, it's lust and it's idolatry. But, that falls both into it because obviously you're lusting and, uh, it becomes an idol. You, you get those unrealistic expectations that, you know, then you search for that in real life and you're not going to find that. You know, it's flat out lust, and if you take it again to another level, it's idolatry. So, you
But
know,
on the other hand, like I said, when you're comparing these against 2,000-year-old ideals, you know, I'm not sure that you can even compare them. Because is it a lot worse now? Oh, hell yeah. Because you can actually, you know, it comes to your home.
hmm
But
But it's like, you're saying there, it's like the pastor at my church. I would probably say, if I were to sit behind closed doors, his most difficult job as a pastor is not only does he use the Bible to give a sermon and, quotes actual Bible scripture, goes through the Bible, but now not only does he have to basically translate that to the congregation, but then find a way to say, okay, because he said it many times. Now you have to remember, back in these times, this is how this was looked at, and this is how this is looked at. And there's always a spot at the end of the sermon where it's, now this is how we can use these facts in our own lives to make it better. And I bet you that's probably the hardest job, is changing old world opinions in a way to be used nowadays. I imagine that probably takes longer than coming up with a darn sermon.
yeah, that would be super hard. And, you know, I think every pastor probably struggles with that, where they have to tie it into today and, what we experience and still say, yeah, this is not okay. Just because the world is, or the flesh wants you to do this, doesn't mean it's okay to God. And, no matter what, then or now, God still is not okay with it. You know, I would never be able to do that.
you know, taking this in a bit of a different direction, and I've always wondered this. I've always wondered what it would be like as far as in my own religion. I'm a Catholic, cradle Catholic. Was baptized 2 months after I was born, and I was confirmed when I was 50 years old because I had turned away for about 20 some years. And I didn't turn away. I always had the beliefs, but I just never attended church or anything like that. Then I took and came back to the church, and the ideals were still there. Okay, that let's put that aside for a second, but that's where my background is from. I've always wondered, especially with the stuff you've heard that's happened in the Catholic Church, how would you like to, what would it be like, and what could what kind of biblical backups could you use to not justify that, to not justify what happened, but keep keep creating the the ideals that the Catholic religion holds for you. It would have to shake your faith to know something like that happened. It does mine. Christ, I remember back in the 60s when I was growing up, I was afraid of the priests. I didn't like them. And as I grew up, until I came back to the church when I was 50, I couldn't give 2 cents for a priest because I didn't trust them. And then all this stuff about what they did came out, and that made it even worse. And I'm going to tell you the truth, between that and some of the stuff that's been written about how the Catholics try to control the population or their population in the church, it's a wonder anybody goes. What would it be like to hear, well, Father so and so did this and Father so and so from that parish in New York just took, and he was having affairs with boys for 20 some years. Would that shake your religion?
Hey, Pat, you're not on screen. You're talking and I'm showing.
I know, but
Okay.
I'll come back. I'll come on so I can talk here. But, would that shake your religion? What do you think, Dale?
Oh, absolutely.
Would that shake yours?
That's,
Would that make you go,
you have to,
why am I what am I doing here? And that's,
you have the Catholic religion, as far as like, you ever notice every time you have a new pope, the stances on certain things change. It's almost like the Catholic Church is ever evolving, shall I say. That would be a clean way to put it. But it's like, well, we didn't believe this before, but we believe this today. And then a new pope comes along and it's like, well, I believe this and nobody else believed that. So now as Catholics, we're going to believe this. And, I have to imagine it gets a little confusing now, but.
Well, you have to consider that it took Vatican II, which was instated in 1962, I think it is, evolved for over 200 years. The church evolved like that through meetings and everything like that through the church for over 200 years. They started Vatican II back in the 1600s. Or, 1800s, I should say. And it took until, that don't sound right either. It must have been the 1700s. Because it took 200 years for it to come in, be instated into the church. And that was where the old ideas got moved aside and some of the new got put into place.
I watched a movie. Can't remember the name of that one either, but it was about a young girl that decided she wanted to be a nun. And through the movie, during that time, Vatican II came out, and all of the older nuns were in an absolute uproar when the rule came out that basically you didn't wear habits anymore and stuff like that. They were like in just a major uproar, very upset about that. And there were some other things that went on too that I forget what it was, but Definitely
can-
the older echelon of the nuns were not very happy with it.
I can remember back. Most of them looked like the what you'd see in what the hell was that? Sound of Music with Sister Maria and that lady that played the head nun. They all looked like her. And that being aside from what we were talking about, but it took them about 15 years to actually break away from the nuns wearing the habits and that. You also had nunneries all over the place, and you don't have any of those now because they don't use as many nuns. You can still get some of these nuns still, devote themselves to the church, but it's nothing like it used to be.
I
couldn't
just
tell
want
you
to say
last
real
time I
quick,
saw one.
sorry to cut you guys off, but if anybody listening wants to chime into anything or respond to anything we're saying, please text me at 330-510-1329 and I will read it on the air and it'll, we'll talk about, what you say. So, just again, 330-510-1329.
All right, we're going to tell you what we're going to do. TEXUS. All right. At. Give me the number again 330
330-510-1329.
013
Two-
510
We've got 5 lines open here at Crooked River Radio. Feel free to
1320.
call in now.
Honestly, we could probably take a call off that too if I
How's that look?
screen shared. That works. We should keep that for all nanosecond.
We can do that.
Okay.
I can add that to the screens.
Okay. Anyway,
Make sure
Back
that
to
number's
our-
right.
330-510. Yes. That's it.
Okay. We're good.
Sweet. Back to our topic. I just wanted to let people know they can, join the show. Or respond and be a part of the show. So I think the next one we should talk about, or next thing we should talk about is should they bring the option as an elective into schools for kids to take a religious class? I think yes, as long as it's an option and they're not force feeding it to the kids who don't want to take it, because if they did that, then there'd be a lot of lawsuits. But personally, I think it's okay. I get, and I know this is going to be brought up at some point, but the separation of church and state, I know that exists, but I would say that would more be taken into account if all kids were forced to take the class, unlike it being an elective.
You're never going to see that
Mm,
because of the fact you've got the AC double or that ACLU that wants nothing to do with religion and any kind of government action or any kind of anything that's governed by the state, by the federal government or whatever. You're never going to see that. They'll fight that in court every time. I've seen stuff like that even within the last 5 years, where they've tried to do different things to bring the Bible back into even statues, for crying out loud. You can't have a religious statue. You can't have a cross on a wall in a public school. Not allowed.
I
Do
don't
you
know.
think because
Well, it's
with them fighting like that, do you think they'd allow a class in there?
I know it's been a half a minute, but there were no classes when I was in school. But I do know religious clubs were allowed. Like they had the I forget what it was called, something of Christian student athletes.
Mhm.
That would get together and pray and stuff before games and do different other religious things. But yeah, it was never in the curriculum, shall I say.
That is more prevalent in college than at the high school level. I know there's a couple groups at Kent State that are not funded by the school, but I know somebody who was like the president of that group, but at the same time, they aren't funded by the school, but the school obviously let them have it. And then there's another one, coalition for student athletes, for religious wise. So they have multiple, just using Kent State.
I just don't think you're going to see that on the public education level.
Nowadays, no. Things have gotten much worse in the school systems, and whatever.
I mean,
I'll keep it G. Whatever things they decide they want to indoctrinate the students with this week is what they throw down people's throats, and obviously, religion would go against a lot of the things that they are trying to teach the children right now. So why would we want to have a contradiction to what we're trying to teach in our schools? It wasn't like that when I was in school. Wasn't quite that bad. Nowadays, I mean, it's crazy.
I mean, there's at my high school, when I was in high school at least, there was a group of maybe 10 people that would meet once a week in one of the classrooms, but the teacher wouldn't be involved. But they would meet in a classroom before school and talk about the Bible. I wasn't involved in that at that point because I wasn't really, like, I had kind of strayed for a while. But I know it was there, but the school didn't shoot it down and say you can't host it at our building. I mean, there's some elementary schools that where churches meet. I know my elementary school still to this day, I believe, has church. It's not a Christian or Catholic school, but they have a church that rents the space from the district on Sundays because the building's not being
stuff
used.
Can happen. That kind of stuff's allowed. I used to rent a building out, and we were a Catholic funded organization, and we had different. We had the Lord of His Grace Fellowship in. We had them for 3 or 4 years. So that kind of stuff happens all the time. But as far as public buildings and that, they'll take the money. They'll take your money.
Mm-hmm.
But getting back to the subject of putting a Bible class in a school, what are you going to teach them as far as what denomination? Who Who's going to
maybe
decide that?
have
Who's going to
have it
decide that?
have it be one class taught by a priest, so the Catholics would be able to take the class, and then one I don't know, one class taught by a non-denominational pastor or teacher or something, and then have a class for every denomination. I
And
mean, most.
You couldn't do that. Do you realize how many this whole thought of non-denominational Protestant churches is a bunch of you know what? Okay. Basically, you had your Protestant religion started because Martin Luther didn't agree with certain aspects of the Catholic religion, but he did some. So he separated from that. And then you had the Lutherans come out. And then somebody else decided, well, we like what the Lutherans are doing. So we're going to go off here and we're going to call ourselves Methodists and we're going to do things different. And then somebody else didn't like what they were doing. And they went off and said, well, we don't like and agree with everything that they say. So we're going to be Baptists. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on down the road. There's like 9 million of them. Now, then you get a church such as what I grew up in was considered a non-denominational Protestant church. They can call themselves that all day long. But if you go to the church and you're there long enough, you can pick up on the fact of how things are taught and what is said. And it is definitely leaning to one denomination or another. Like my non-denominational church I went to when I was a kid was about as Southern Baptist as you could find. I saw everything in that church but snake handlers. I mean, so you can't tell me for a minute that was non-denominational. That's just how they packaged it. And that is a very loose term that is used by many churches nowadays to make it more comfortable for people of other denominations to come in and feel as though they're welcome, as they basically try to convert them to whatever it is that they're teaching.
And honestly, non-denominational, I've been told this and I've done research, non-denominational isn't the biggest denomination in the world. Assemblies of God is. I think there's about 2 million non-denominational, and there's about 8 billion, or did I say million or billion? Whatever. So 2 million non-denomination, 8 million Assemblies of God. So Assemblies of God is actually the biggest denomination out there, which I just learned like a month ago.
You know, Dale, talking about that, everything but a snake handler. You brought back a memory for me. I sat and actually, I used to have to clean up after this Word of His Grace church whenever they were in there. And I had to have the building set up for the next morning. And I come in about 9 o'clock one night. They weren't done. And I looked in there and I saw these people gyrating all over the place. And this preacher was just, get the devil out, shake the devil out of you. Oh, it's like they were leading them through hoops, you know. Yeah.
You go through parts of the South.
I could never do that.
When I say Southern Baptist, that takes up a lot of, even though it's not Southern, Appalachia and stuff. And those folks take their religion seriously.
The way that
I mean, very seriously.
The way
It's
So
no holds barred.
the way that I was taught, and I'm sure some of you were this way too. Uh, Christ said, if you're going to pray, pray alone and pray quietly. And that's the way I've always done it. If I'm gonna if I'm gonna do any extensive praying, eh, that's why I like going to church. I get in my own little world there. I can free my mind to think about anything it wants to. I listen to the sermon. I listen to the gospel reading. I listen to the the other readings, and that to me is really relaxing. And that's when I'm going to pray. It's going to be quietly. It may be in a large group, but I'm praying quietly. And
This. Oh, go ahead.
some
Pat,
of
sorry.
these church religions that you have nowadays, where I got to admit, I do like some of them because some of them have pastors that can really, really lay out a sermon, and it's not necessarily a it's not necessarily a Catholic church that does it. It's this that big place down there in Canton. The pastor of that's one of the best speakers. He could run for president and talk you into voting for him. And he's just one of those talkers that he makes you relate to things in the Bible that are current, that can be related to current things today. And then
And
it's praying to yourself. You don't have to you don't have to make a spectacle to pray.
and I mean, I'll flat out say, because you mentioned him, I go to one of the locations of his church. So you're right. He's exceptional as a pastor in the way he teaches. I mean,
But
I,
on the other side of that coin, Eric, I don't think I could ever go to one of his services because of the other stuff that they do there. I don't know that I'd like the loud music and everything that they portray in that church.
I,
He's a hell of a speaker, though. I'll give him that.
well, I mean, I never thought that until I went to the church that I did before, and then now going to this church, and nothing against the church I used to go to. I'm friends with the pastor and everything. But, um, you know, I never thought I'd be into the concert style, service. But I realize I'm really into that. In that, just I it I get more out of something like that than just a normal worship band playing. And I'll say I was friends with a lot of the worship band at the church I just left, but it's just different. The concert style is something personally I like. I don't. I can't explain why, but
Like I say, the reason that I like the Catholic Church, I don't know if I've ever told anybody this, is that when you go in there, you expect a really dignified service. All the weddings are dignified. The church service every Sunday is dignified, and even the funerals are the most absolutely dignified things you'd ever want to see. It's pure Bible. It's pure scriptures. It's gospel, and to me that's where I want to be.
w-
And for me to take and try to go somewhere else, especially at this age, I don't think I'd find anything I'd like.
Well, I think part of what you're missing with what what Erik is saying. Um, like for me personally, okay, I like music. I love live music. I always have. Um, like in a Catholic situation where there's a lot of like pipe organ and
Pipe
stuff
organ
like
and
that, or whatever they call them.
pipe organ
Uh,
and choir. I love
that
choir.
tends to like kind of overly relax me to the point that you almost want to fall asleep because you are that relaxed when you're hearing those tones of music. Now, what happens at a Protestant church, especially now, I grew up in a church with the old hymns and that old stuff. Mind you, there was still a little bit of there was music in the background, but I had a problem when I first started going to church with Justine because the contemporary music I couldn't deal with that. I just wanted to hear the old hymns. I wanted to hear some old rugged cross, some in the garden, some stuff like
Exactly.
that. And you
How
don't
Exactly.
hear
great
that
thou
anymore.
art.
But those this contemporary music over time grew on me. So now when you get to a church that actually has a worship band that where you've got a drummer and you got a guitarist and they're playing some of this a little more contemporary upbeat stuff, it kind of wakes you up, gets the blood flowing, puts you in the church mode, and I think gets you ready to be a little bit more accepting of what you're about to hear and allows you to be awake enough to listen, understand, and take in what is being said.
What?
So for me, it's like pre-gaming. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it gets you ready for why you're really there. I mean, obviously you're there for the sermon and to learn and whatnot, but it just gets the blood flowing, gets you ready to go, and get you ready for everything else.
Where do you stand, or how do you feel about churches that like write their own music versus using like music from either other churches or the big time Christian bands? Do you-
Well, we have in our church. There's a song that the pastor and the one guy that plays guitar wrote, and it's a really cool song. Heck, if they had a whole album, they could probably produce it. It was actually
Mhm.
really good. Um, and the worship director has written many songs. Um, I can't say that all of them are actually used at church,
Mhm.
but you can find them online and listen to them, and it's
Mhm.
all worship music and pretty
Yeah.
good. So, if you why not? If you want to use it, use it. There's
Mhm.
nothing wrong with it. I
Mhm.
mean, somebody had to write the other songs. So
Mhm.
what's the difference if I use the one I wrote or if I use the one somebody else wrote? It
Like
serves the same purpose.
like I'll say, my church has multiple albums. That shameless plug here. They're coming out with a new one. Coming up in uh March, I think. Beginning of March, but and a lot of the songs are that they do are amazing, and some of the songs that they use for that other people wrote are so good too, you know. So it's a mix. But on a different note, away from the worship side, um, what do you think about community in the church? Do you think that's important? Like getting involved in the church, um, if you can, getting involved in Bible study groups or being a part of volunteering in some way, shape, or form. Building that community within the church. I know Pat and I have talked about this on the radioactive show, where Do you think that's important, Dale?
I very much agree with that. But unfortunately, that is one of the places where I personally drop the ball. Um, but yes, there's especially, if you're in a larger church, there are plenty of things for people to do, and to not only do you do these things to help your church, but it's allowing you to meet people and to interact with others at the same time. I have a crazy work schedule, and it makes it a little difficult for me to do it a lot now. And I have a tendency sometimes to get kind of lazy on Sunday mornings. So, to be, a door greeter or a guy that helps with the parking in the parking lot, or do some different things like that. I don't get around to do it. I should, but I don't, and I firmly agree with it. Being involved in your church, I think, is fairly important.
Mm-hmm. Building a
It,
network. Yeah. Even if it's just, if you're able to fit it in your schedule, go getting a couple people together and going to dinner or breakfast on a weekend or something, again, if schedule fits for
well,
everybody. But, I think that's important. I used to be like with my old church, and I think I'll probably be like this once I get to know people in the new church I'm going to. But I used to put together dinners with people all the time. And I'm still putting together dinners with people from the old church because, I've become friends with them. But, that's important just to be around other Christians or whatever denomination you are. You know, people with the same belief system as you.
Well, if it wasn't for the involvement of community and church, a group like I operate, uh, the Cuyahoga Falls Amateur or oh Jesus,
Crooked
Crooked River
River
Amateur Radio.
Amateur Radio.
I don't believe I
Oopsie.
said that. I don't believe I did that. That'll be a cut.
Yeah. Yeah, if anybody's listening from there, they'll definitely capture that audio.
The Crooked
And if
River
you heard that, if you know, you know.
Yeah.
the Crooked River Amateur Radio Club, if it wasn't for involvement in community, the church that we're in right now and us probably would have never gotten together. They know we're community oriented. That's the thing with the 501c3 groups. Basically, most 501c3s are religious organizations and nonprofit. It all has to be quote unquote nonprofit. And nonprofits are all the churches that work for different work to make different things happen in the communities that are for the good of the community. And you have to have that in a church like that. In order to get your people to work, the people of each organization to work together, you got to have dinners like that. You got to have pancake breakfast. You got to have stuff where you're actually giving to the community.
Mm-hmm.
Even down to the fact of if you do over the Christmas or Thanksgiving holidays, you do a free dinner. Now that's liable to cost your church or organization $400, $500, $600. But then the other part about that is that's all
Or
tax
even
deductible for the other
just
groups.
help family in need in your local community. If you could get a company, I was trying to do this with my old church, but it, we just ran out of time. Get a company, a store that's willing to donate,
And
and
that's what you have to do. And
yeah,
that's how you make some of this stuff happen without it costing the church or organization an arm and a leg.
okay. When
I
it
can
comes
tell
to
you a
the
lot about that stuff. We won't go into it today. We won't go into that tonight.
501c3 church being a nonprofit organization, how are they able to take tithes? How are they're making money? How's that?
Well,
Would you
you're
be able
allowed
to?
as a 501c3, depending on your size and income, you're allowed to have or take so much money to operate.
Mhm.
That's how a lot of these 501c3s get by.
Not
But
only that, the money.
you have to donate though at the end of the year. You have to donate whatever profits that you make to another club or organization, probably another 501c3, in order to clear your books. Because at the end of the year, you're not allowed to. Your profit has to be zero.
It's like you get a lot of churches that, you know, they do get this money and it goes towards the salaries of the pastors,
Mhm.
and different things like that. And then you'll see, uh, the money goes right back into the church. Like our church, he's talking about, and you're talking about community and doing things. You know, our church will do several things through the summer with like say they're doing like a movie night and they do like a big movie screen out on the lawn and invite the community. But beforehand, they're out there. They have games out for the kids, maybe blow up houses or those little castle
Bounce
things
houses.
or
Yeah.
all these different things for the kids to enjoy. And then at the same time, they're trying to get a little religion into them here and there. And but that stuff, to rent all that stuff and to have the food and the different things, costs money. So the money is going back into the church and into the community. Like our church already had like 2 additions on it because the congregation has gotten so much larger.
Mhm.
So there's, that's where the ties are going. It's not necessarily, you know, uh, my pastor lives in a house no different than yours.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he's not in some kind of mansion up on the hill. He makes enough money to live, you know, happily. And the rest of the money, like I said, goes right back into the church, goes out to do different things for the community. Uh, Mission trips cost money, different things like that. All these different things cost money. And the money that comes into the church, and that's why I like the church that I go to, because I see that money come right back out and right
Mhm.
into the community around it. So I know that any money that I put in that plate is money well served.
Yeah.
It's going to a good place.
Yeah. It's not just padding the pockets of the administrators of the church.
Well, theoretically, that's not allowed to happen that way.
Well,
We
Any,
all know it
any,
does.
according to
there's loopholes in everything, Pat.
according to the 501c3 rules, you're
Loophole.
the money anything that you get in money wise has to be used for the community or whatever, or donated to another 501c3 to move it around. You're like I said, 501c3 money, donated money, has to be used for good. That's all there
By
is to
golly,
it.
Jim Baker says you're wrong.
Jim Baker ain't been
Oh,
around for
Eric
a while.
you probably don't know nothing about no Jim Baker.
I think I've heard the name, but no. There's
Yeah,
a couple.
he got caught with several $1,000 air conditioned doghouse and Yeah, he was living high on the hog because
Yeah.
Jesus told him that he should live high on the hog.
Oh, there's a few people,
Oh
the
yeah.
ones with, I won't mention names, that allegedly have the private jets and all that.
Oh, you
But
name it, he had it.
yeah,
He was the original. You see these guys they talk about now?
yeah.
He started that whole thing. And I
Uh,
watch some of these guys on TV
the
that
700
their
Club.
sermon is nothing more than, like the one guy's, you got to plant a seed. You got to plant a seed. I swear, if you plant a seed, that seed will grow. And when he's saying plant a seed, and he very clearly explains it to you, it's give me your money, and I guarantee you, if you give me your money, you'll get more money back. And he even shows people going, yes, I gave money to the church, and then all of a sudden I got a check for $200,000 in the mail. And
Yeah.
it just goes on and on and on. There's a
Ponzi
lot of false
schemes.
prophets out there.
The ones that say, "Oh, you give the 10%, you're gonna be blessed more." Nah, I
Well,
don't
Yeah, there are very many false prophets out there,
like.
and it's weeding them out.
And I like when churches do like and I forget there is a term, but like where um I'll use for example, I don't know if any of you have watched Joel Osteen, but at the end of his sermons, they'll do like
send me the
if
money.
you want to accept God.
Send me the money.
Okay, well, that wasn't my point. But, like, if you want to accept God, even my church does this, where if you want to accept Jesus in your life, say this prayer. I like that. I've never been to a church that has done that. I like that. Where, it's a prayer that invites God into your life. And that's not bad at all. I like that in churches. So I don't know where you guys stand on that idea, but I like it.
Well, as far as Joel Osteen,
I
wouldn't
brought
trust
him up
him.
as an example.
I wouldn't trust that man as far as I could throw him. But that's another show altogether.
Yeah, I'm using him as an example for. Well, I'll tell you something off the air though, to do with him, but anyway, what do we want to get into next, or do we want to wrap up and maybe do this again next month?
Well, we can keep going on. I figured on 2 hours.
Okay.
We're an hour and 23 minutes
Okay.
right at the moment.
That works. Let me go into topic. See what
Let's clear it out, Eric. Clear it out. Do y'all know what a what a hillbilly calls a deer with no eyes?
No.
It's a I have no idea.
Yeah, I got some jokes
no
like
idea.
that, but they're not appropriate for the program.
Yeah,
I thought that-
they're not. For this
I've been
setting.
laughing. I've been laughing about this thing all afternoon. No idea.
I got a lady at work that finds them and throws them at me darn near every day at work. Well, she doesn't work with us anymore, but when she did, she would. Well, some of them are just downright hilarious, but they're not appropriate for confines of this fine video radio show.
All right, let's get back on some other topics here. What you got, Eric?
Yeah.
Throw one at us. Let's hit it out of the park.
Actually, I was gonna throw you, put you on the spot and see if you had a topic. I know we had topics, but I'd like to see if either of you have a topic that we could throw out. Put both of you on the spot. Keep you on your toes.
How about the difference between? Let's do this. Why are you in the denomination or religious sect that you are? What
Um,
draws you to that? That seems like a good topic, even for Dale. Dale and I've discussed this before.
I would say I just like the feel of non-denominational churches versus, not to say they have less guidelines, which I've heard from denominations, other pastors of other denominations saying that they kind of write up their own guidelines, but as long as a church is biblically anchored, for lack thereof a better term, and I see that a lot of the non-denominational churches that I've been around, and I've been to a couple just in the last two and a half months, on top of Assemblies of God, and I just think and it falls into the concert feel. Usually, the non-denominational churches are the more concert type feel churches. I don't. I'm just throwing out a opinion, not a fact. So if anybody listening has an opposite of opinion of that, please give it, whether it's in the comments on whatever site you're listening on or through the phone number, which is 330-510-1329. You know, tell me what you think. But you know, that's where I stand.
You're up next, Dale.
Well, let me count the reasons. And the first part is funny. I like a Protestant style service because I'm used to the more or less non-regimented type service. Now, even your contemporary churches now that are out are a little bit more regimented in what they do. But I mean, it's like when I grew up going to church, nobody was handing you a booklet at the door telling you what was going to happen at this time, what was going to happen at this time. You're going to sing this at this time. You're going to kneel at this time. You're going to repeat these words back to me at this time. You're going to very, very regimented. Now, my sister, she converted to be a Lutheran, she likes that regimented stuff. So that's parts of the Catholic religion that are still in the Lutheran religion that draws my sister. She really likes it. What drives me nuts is I say I have borderline OCD. Many other people say there ain't no borderline to it. So I am very regimented about what I do and how I do things. But for some reason, when it comes to church, I like that open play field. Then, not to mention, as I've grown up and gotten a little more educated, there are many thoughts and beliefs and ideas of the Catholic Church that I personally just do not agree with. I'm not saying they're bad people. I'm not saying that that's a horrible religion by any means. It's just
I've always knew that was why you didn't like me.
You know, it's just not for me. And I have several reasons why, but that we've had these talks. Well, we could go with this for another 2 hours.
I knew. I've always known that's why you didn't like me.
You know. Oh no, that has nothing to do with it. It's your big eyebrows.
Hey Dale. Hey Dale, watch.
Okay,
Yeah,
this
I
just
mean,
got
I
trippy.
just and I think a lot of it is that is the first religion that I was exposed to as a small child, very small. I was, I wouldn't call myself a cradle Christian, but when I was old enough to know better, I was taken to church, and I went to church sometimes 3 times a week, and all these different beliefs and the ideas were ingrained into me, and it just so for me, even as a 20-year-old, you know 5 years ago, when I was 20, um
Yeah,
to
whatever.
look at the
You married
Catholic religion,
you married Justine
it
while
was
you were
so
10.
different to me. It wasn't something that I was ever going to be drawn to. And I think that it might be a little bit of that in your own situation. Had you been brought up in a Protestant church, you may view things differently, but that wasn't the case. Or you may have decided to, you know what? No, I'm an adult now and I want to be Catholic. And that may have been the road you took. Who knows?
I
It's
took
hard to
that
say.
I took that road at 51 years old. Let me tell you, now since it's down to me now, I mentioned earlier that it's a dignified service. And that falls into part of the regimentation. I like stuff that Christ said right before he was nailed to the cross that if you're going to pray, the people that pray the same words over and over again will not have their prayers heard, and that kind of falls out of the regimented side somewhat. Now, mind you, I'm not going to say that I follow every. I don't. There are things that the Catholic Church has done. There's things that the Catholic Church stands for, and there's things that they're the ideals that they have that I want no part of. As far as because I feel that a lot of it is church rules that have come up through the ages, and they don't need to be there. Hell, they used to tell you could only eat fish on Friday, and now they've kind of loosened the rules on that till it's only Lent.
Well, and
And
before that, it was you fasted on Fridays, didn't you?
no, no, you fasted on any you had to fast on Lent or fast on Ash Wednesday and during Easter weekend. Be-
That's a topic we should get into. Fasting.
But the thing, yeah, we can. But like I said, I like the regimentation to a point. I followed it to a point. You guys knew every time Lent came around that I'd eat fish on Friday.
And there was that one time
Did I have to?
I was watching, and so was God.
Did I have to? No, I didn't have to. But I did it
He ate a burger.
because I believe in my religion, and I follow. It's what I follow for the most
Well,
part.
you're old enough now; you don't have to worry about it. You're
But
off the hook. You're a senior citizen.
what came down to it, or what it comes down to, I love the dignity that's in that church. I love walking in there and hearing a beautiful choir. IHM's got one of the best choirs that's around in the state of Ohio. They've
Well, and they are beautiful churches too.
and
I mean, don't
the
take that
church
away.
church is gorgeous. You go down to downtown Cleveland to Saint was it Saint Joseph's, I think it is. Or it's a Saint Joseph's Church Cathedral. The cathedral's just gorgeous inside. Watching a service in there, watching the I can't think of the name. The head of the Cleveland diocese do a mass is absolutely awesome. it's stuff like that that draws me to the church. That's stuff like that that has kept me there. But that doesn't mean that I don't look outside of the church. The church, Catholic Church used to tell you at one point before Vatican III or Vatican II, they told you at one point you are not allowed to take and partake in any service in any other church but ours. You can't. If you go into that church, you're supposed to sit there and not take anything in because it's not our denomination. It's not a Catholic church. They've loosened up on that somewhat. You weren't allowed to get married in anybody's church but a Catholic church, or you'd get expelled from the church. You'd get excommunicated from the church. But most of that, there again, has changed since the 60s. That being said, there are still things that I don't agree with. I don't agree with their stand on abortion. Never have, never will. I don't agree with some of the stuff that they're allowing coming out of the pulpit now. But I'm not. When I go to church, I go to church for my Catholic Church, my beliefs. I go there to refresh my beliefs. All the other stuff is just side noise, and I don't necessarily hear it. But when it comes down to the gospel, when it comes down to the readings, when it comes down to the communion or the communion every week, well, I love that. There's nothing like it. There is nothing like walking up, let alone being on the other side of this coin like I was with being a Eucharistic minister. There is nothing like walking up, putting your hands out, having a wafer put in your hand, and they hold it up saying the body of Christ. You say amen. They put it in your hand, or you stick your tongue out and they'll put it on your tongue. And there is such a connection with Christ at that point and with God at that point. There's no other feeling in the world like that for me. I don't care, if you want to go to your churches that don't do this stuff, that's your problem. That's your decision in life. But personally, I love doing stuff like that. And this is why that's why I try to stay with the Catholic rules when I can. There are times that I slip. I'm human. But when it comes down to it, my beliefs has always been in the Trinity, and they will always be here till the day I'm gone. Now
Protestant church still believes in the
that's
Trinity.
my sermon for today. Believe in Catholic.
I just wish for once, instead of them handing me a wafer, they'd at least give me like a half a loaf of bread. Because sometimes by the time you get out of church, you hungry. So, break off a little more bread for a brother.
Or at least give bread instead of a wafer.
You never see that anymore because it's all about hygiene and stuff now.
That wafer is actually called Lenten bread, and it's a flour, pretty much just flour and water mixed together and baked.
Unleavened bread.
Unleavened, yeah. And it's baked in a certain way to where it does not usually bread would rise, but the wafers don't.
Well, it's because they have no baking soda or
you'd know that
baking powder in them.
You'd know that.
Well, of course I do, because where do you think that started? When if you look at when Lent begins, it Ash Wednesday, and you lead up to the Last Supper. why was Christ going into Jerusalem? It was well, Palm Sunday, which starts I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's
Palm
the time of
Sundays.
year where
When he rode
the
into,
Jews would eat unleavened bread. You would see the bitters. That's why, like in a lot of Jewish places, you see the capers coming out and different things like that. The diet was different at that time of year. I forget what exact holiday it is, but it comes
isn't it
in
Return of
right
the King?
as
Isn't
Palm
it the,
Sunday is happening.
isn't it the Return of the King? Is that what it's
No,
called?
that name doesn't. Oh,
I know what you're talking
Lord.
about. It's was the return of Christ to Jerusalem before the
But that's
before
that's
everything
why the
started.
menu is the way it is. And I think even way back then, that time of year, that certain weekend, or maybe even longer than a weekend, that was like the staple diet of the
And
Hebrews.
that the Palm
So
Sunday
that's
actually,
why the Last Supper consisted of the bread and the bitters and the different things.
Palm Sunday actually starts Holy Week. Now that's pretty much, and it starts from Palm Sunday to Easter Sunday. And you know you're supposed to. That's another thing too. You're supposed to. Catholics are supposed to attend Mass every day that whole week. And one of my favorite masses, if you want to talk about dignity and stuff like that, is it's the Holy Thursday Mass, where where Christ supposedly washed the feet of his servants, and then you had the Last Supper, and that to me was always the prettiest mass. That's the prettiest mass of the year, just because of the story behind it and the readings. That's beautiful. The ones I don't like is probably the week before the Palm Sunday Mass, because that's where he was convicted and sent to Herod. But yeah, and that's a long drawn out mass there. That mass is probably another almost a half hour longer than other ones. But you know, I'm Catholic. I got to put up with it, or I do, and I like it. Anyway, that was a good. That felt good talking like that, talking about that. What else are we going to talk about?
So something random just came to mind. Um, in this is kind of something I've been wondering. When it comes to names of churches, especially if they're in the same region, I get their 501c3 most of the time, but how does it not get confusing? Like, I I won't use names, but you guys know what church I go to. There's also a church in Texas. Well, Texas is not our, obviously our region, but with the same name. And there was the church that I used to go to. I'll say the name because why not?
Church or what's happening
It's
now?
not the one I'm at now, but I used to go to a church called New Life. Well, there was one in Lorraine, I believe, somewhere on the west side of Cleveland, that was also called New Life. Had no affiliation at all, but had the same name. How do they? How does that not get confusing even on And I mean, the one I went to also had a location in Aurora, but um, the one that wasn't affiliated, how, especially when it came to like tax and billing, how would that not get confusing?
Well,
Like,
that's simple. You just like if you look on your pay stub,
yeah.
okay, there's a tax ID on there,
Mhm.
which refers to the business that you're working for.
Mhm.
So they may have the same name, but the address is different, and that tax ID is going to be different. And at the end of the day, the IRS isn't looking at what your name is, they're looking at the number.
Mhm.
And that number tells them who you are.
That's
Okay.
like,
So, kind of, they can, just like, say, your church has more than one campus.
Mhm.
Okay. Each one
It
is going
does.
to have a different ID,
Okay.
even though they're affiliated. I can't guarantee you this, but I'm assuming because they're in different
Mhm.
places and tax rules are different in different places,
well, you're assuming that they have a
they're all
tax
going to have
ID
a different
too.
number, but they're affiliated.
Any 501c's got the 501c3 number too. It's your ID number for them.
Even if they're locations of one church, are you saying, Pat?
Each organization's got their own number, and
So,
that's how you pay your. That's how you declare your taxes.
oh,
For
okay.
that's how
So I
you.
think what we're getting at here is if I have a church
Mhm.
called Joe Schmo's Church of God and I have 5 campuses, are they all going to have that same number, or will they be looked at individually and have different numbers?
That that's where I'm going with the second part of the question. Yes.
It depends on that. That depends on if they're owned by what entity they're owned by. If they're owned by a national organization, they're all going to be looked at under the umbrella of one.
Well, okay. Let's say they're a local organization, but they have multi
Well, they're
campuses.
still going to be all looked at on
That.
as long as that entity owns the other the other buildings or whatever.
Mhm.
They're still going to be looked at as one
Mhm.
because that's the way that stuff works. You're given and when you apply for a 501c3 license, you're given a you're given a number, and at the end of the year, 501c3s get this little card that asks you to declare your tax. And as long as you're under 50 some $1,000 for a group my size, as long as we haven't made $52,000, we don't have to pay any taxes on it.
So, let's say just with what we were talking about with 501c3s earlier. Let's say a church needs stuff done, like a new roof or repaving a parking lot. Can the tithe money be used for that according to 501c3
As long
rules?
as it is donated with that, um, with
That intention.
with that intention, yes. As long as if the if it's donated, that check says this is for the roof of the
Mm.
church. That's got to be donated, and that's not allowed to be used for anything else.
Okay.
That's just the way that is.
Yeah, I'm not
I
sure if
deal with.
that's. I think churches are under a different type of umbrella.
I don't think so.
Don't quote me, but
I think if you're given, if you are any
there's a
kind of a
lot of
five,
churches use the church money to do things for the church, and it don't necessarily like if I put cash in the bucket,
that
I'm not
cash in the,
earmarking that for a certain thing, but it still very well could be
that
used
cannot be put.
to benefit the church.
That has to go into the general fund of the church. If it's earmarked for something, we go through this stuff all the time in a Catholic church. we'll get different organizations that will give us envelopes that you can put in the basket if you want, or you can mail them in, what have you. But it states right on there, this is for the
Mm-hmm.
this is for the church roof. This is for this organization to do this. This for this organization to do that.
Or
The
like, for example, like this
um,
is for wildfire
the
relief.
the brethren of uh, the Brethren of Catholic Church or something like. It's where that's actually that money is donated to running the where there's a place up in Willoughby that's the church. When you decide you want to be a priest, that's where you go first. You're actually put up through there, and then you're assigned to a church or something around here or whatever. But you're liable. Becoming a priest is quite a detailed thing, and those people, most of those pastors and priests have all they've got their doctorates. They're pretty smart guys. They have to be to deal with the public like they do. Let's go with about one more question. I think
Uh, okay.
we got 9 more minutes. Let's wrap it at 2 hours.
Okay. Sounds good. When it comes to why am I drawing a blank? We were just talking about it. Fasting. That's it. When it comes to fasting, do you guys think like having a church having a set fast should be a thing, or like that should be between you and God? Like, ugh, sorry. Um, the like one church does a week, another church does 3 weeks. You know, fasting something. It doesn't have to be food. But do you think the fast should be between you and God in the way of how long you do it, as long as you have the right motives, or should the church set the the length of how long you do it?
Let me ask you this question before we answer. Are you referring to fasting in general, or are you referring to Lent?
No, fasting in
And
general.
what's the topic of fasting at Lent?
No, this isn't at Lent. This is like both churches I've gone to. They did a week. Well, one did a week at the beginning of the year. One did 21 days. So, like when it comes to that, what do you guys think of when like does the church have a right, or is that between you and God?
I think it's between me and God personally. If like we've talked about a little bit ago, the Catholic faith wants you to fast for the 40 days that the 40 days of Lent, starting on Ash Wednesday and
Mm-hmm.
continuing to Easter Sunday. Yours, that's probably one of the holiest month and a half, or part of the Catholic calendar year. They've got several events set up that are, you got Stations of the Cross, which is every Friday night. You've got the different Bible studies and everything that go on during the week, and and it's the high point of rights to Christian RCI Christian initiation. RCIA, I don't know what the last letter stands for. It's rights Christian initiation something or other. RCIA. But as far as anytime you're going to fast, as far as I'm concerned, it's between me and God. If He wants me to fast, if He wants me to not eat meat on Wednesday, not eat meat on Friday, He can tell me to do so, and I can follow what's in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to have a church sit there and tell me, you've got to fast 40 days for Lent. The chances of that happening,
Slim to none.
And
Let me know how that works out for you.
It's like they're also like you don't have to fast with food. You could fast.
oh, you can give up something for Lent, yeah, but that's not really considered fasting.
Well, that's
But
yeah.
actually, most Catholics I've known in my life were asked to give up something for Lent
Yeah, that's
and still did the fasting on Fridays.
exactly.
It was two different things.
Exactly.
But I
Your
the
what the fasting and giving up something for Lent is you're giving it up. You're giving up a pleasure for Christ. You're giving up a pleasure that you could be taking advantage of or whatever. You're giving it up for Lent. You're sacrificing it for, like Christ sacrificed His life for you.
mm-hmm.
That's the way the fasting and the giving stuff up for Lent both work.
I mean that's the definition of fasting that church, at least both of the churches I've been to, that's their definition of fast. You don't have to do it with food. For example, you could do it with social media. You could do it with
that's giving up something, and it's not a fast.
Fasting is not eating.
Fast is
well, yeah. Churches lost that definition, I guess. Because some people can't not eat.
Well, okay,
Like-
my curiosity is here. Now, you were telling me at the beginning of the year you had several days where you guys were quote unquote fasting.
Yeah.
I have never been in a Protestant church that dealt with fasting. So my question to you is, what was the purpose of it? What were you celebrating or commemorating, or what was the idea behind what your particular church was doing?
So actually, with both churches, because I went to two for like a couple weeks. Their theory behind it is give up whatever, but use that time to spend time the time I would be on social media. Instead of being on social media, use that time to spend with God.
Okay, so that had nothing to do with fasting. That was an attempt by your church to get people to, lay down the telephone, step away from the video game, don't do this for a half a minute, and try to grow your relationship with God.
put your
Now
finger.
They
I
call
get
it
it. I
fasting.
get it. It makes perfect sense. It's a good thing to suggest to your congregation. But yeah, that in itself has nothing to do with fasting.
But at the same time, some people can't fast. Like,
Well, they don't. If they don't have to, they don't.
well,
The Catholic Church doesn't want anybody to die because they're fasting. I mean,
Well, yeah.
Nobody would want that.
well, that's when if you're on medications, you you can't fully fast. You have to eat or you're going to get sick. So maybe you could give up a meal or in place and this is what, this is their theory behind it. If you're on, like, if you have health issues and you can't fast and you have to take medicine, give up something else.
If
That,
you if you've been
Go
in
ahead.
the Catholic Church as long as I have, there are certain times where they actually feel they they will actually declare things like when we used to have to eat fish on Friday. Okay, that was all well and good. You, but on usually on Thanksgiving weekend, there would be a proclamation by the church that said you don't have to eat just fish on Friday this week because we want to we want to help the poverty and the grief stricken, and in order to do that, we don't want all the food from Thanksgiving going to waste. So go ahead and eat meat. There's certain times during the year that they'll do that. And, it just comes down to that the church does, in some aspects, the church does have a heart. Doesn't seem like it sometimes, but it does. And the one thing I'm noticing between my religious beliefs slash, do you guys actually feel that you communicate with God? I mean, in your own soul and in your own heart.
Absolutely, I do every day.
Do you feel
Sometimes
that?
several
Do you
times a
feel
day.
that you're getting that? That you're getting that other than what beliefs have been instilled in you? Do you believe you're getting that from the church? Because you guys are sitting here describing the music and this other stuff, and it kind of made me wonder
That's
that.
Well, the music and the stuff like that, it's a form of worship, which is brought up very avidly throughout the Bible about how you should have these different forms of worship to Christ. It's your time to sing a song, connect, give praise to the Lord, thank Him for things that He's done. It's almost like a prayer in itself, I guess you could say. But it's your time to uh
Has that been?
kind of come closer to God before the sermon starts. Now, not to say that's why I say, like, the whole pipe organ thing, that kind of like those sounds kind of, it's almost like listening to the thunderstorm and putting you to sleep. These other, the more upbeat stuff kind of invigorates you and gets you just awake and just ready for whatever information you're about to take in. And it's like getting you closer to God before you take that step into the learning aspect of the sermon. At least that's my take.
For me, I feel that the only time I hear from God is when I'm listening to the pastor speak or sermons. There's specific non-televangelists that I'll listen to. There's one out of New York who's passed in the last few years, but his name is Tim Keller. He does a really good job of conveying the message of whatever he's speaking about. So I get a lot out of listening to him, but I get more out of listening to sermons and getting context or being in a small group setting, and talking than just reading the Bible itself. I am bad at comprehension, so actually being able to talk about it makes me understand it a lot better than just sitting
Okay,
there.
Eric, I want to lay something on you that occurred to me back when I was about 55.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's been a long time ago.
this was
Oh yeah,
right
we know
shortly
that.
after Debbie passed.
Oh.
I was a wreck. I was a train wreck for 2 years. And I used to write poetry, believe it or not.
Mhm.
And I used to some of the poetry I expressed my political and
Mhm.
religious beliefs in it. And there was a line that even to this day I don't know how it came out of my mind, but I think it was sent to me.
Mhm.
And that was, I was talking about your subconscious mind in the poem. And one of the lines was, could, don't you think that it could be said that there's more to that little voice that's in your head? Could that voice be that of God? Wouldn't it be odd? Think about that a minute. Could you be every 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 time? Now you gotta understand from somewhere where this came from. With me, anyway, this came
Mhm.
from the fact that. Oh, thank you, dear. I just got some milk. I'm gonna get a Twinkie.
Oh.
Uh, I must have been a
Give
Okay.
me a
good
Wow.
boy.
chocolate one.
A chocolate Twinkie to boot.
If you ain't had them yet, you need to find you one.
Well, we're gonna have one here in a minute.
Yeah, you're gonna have to find you one.
But
They're good.
getting back to that, you have to realize that I believe in the Holy Trinity, the Father, Son, the Holy Ghost. I've always thought that the Holy Ghost was a communicator.
Mhm.
And that little voice that's saying, Eric, you better be a good boy and you better not do that. Could that
Is
be,
that God?
could that be coming from God? I bet you've never thought about that. Have you ever thought about that, Dale?
Absolutely. All the time. Because there are instances where you're about to do something or you're about to say something and something just tells you, you know what,
It ain't worth
it's
it.
like with my boss at work. There are several places where if I wanted to attempt to go after a personal attack, I could do it at any time. Um, but and even when I'm just mad and raging and I just want to, just get into whatever it is that I'm upset about, it's like you get that voice in your head that's like, oh, not now, Dale. Step away. And then you get that time to think and that time to kind of reflect on what you were about to do, and you decide that you find out that that it would have made you feel better at the time, but it probably wasn't the best decision in the world because your actions were going to
Represent
affect
God.
much more people than just yourself. And yeah, I do. I think that the whole thing of the angel and the devil on your shoulder, it was speaking, each one of them speaking into an ear. I firmly believe in that.
I do too.
Absolutely.
I do too. But for somebody that hasn't went through some of the experiences that I have, maybe not. They might not have that revelation. And it really was one when I wrote that line and I thought to myself, boy, that's good. And that's so
Yeah, I
true.
should have thought of this earlier.
That is so true. But what do you think, Eric? Have you ever thought of it of it that way?
I mean, I'm so deep in my head that I don't know what's me and what's God because I overthink way too much to the point where my mental health is destroyed at some points. So,
When that first thought pops into your head, that's where you got. If you stop and analyze that first whatever that first line that says, "Eric, you better think about this." That's God talking to you. At least that's what I've always thought.
or I've learned something in the past couple or last month that has really helped me. If I'm going through a rough time, pray through my thoughts. You know, tell God what I'm thinking, and if it's not in line with what He says, you know, He'll take it. You know, you're casting your thoughts on Him,
And
if that makes sense.
that's the way you should live. I think we need to wrap this up. We're at 2 minutes and 10 or
2 hours.
2 hours and 10 minutes. So
Okay.
let's wrap it up for this week.
Okay.
What do you
Sounds
think?
good.
You guys want to do another one next month?
Yeah. I just speaking of poems, and we'll talk off the air. I just sent you a Instagram link, both of you. My friend has a he does Christian poetry. He writes poems, and he has an Instagram page. And he had a really good one earlier this week. So you guys, if you get a chance, check it out.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Pat was a poet and didn't know it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but my feet show it because they're long, fellas. All right, there's no intro and no exit music, so I think
Next time we're gonna have a poetry reading.
readings by Pyles. Yeah, that's a
You ain't gonna get no poetry out of me.
Poetry by Pyles.
poetry by Pyles. Yeah, I'll even make up a little
Piles of
sign for that.
poetry.
I'll make up a little sign for that.
Piles of poetry, if you will.
Piles of
Yeah.
poetry. There you go.
That's a whole new show.
Yeah. Anyway, let's go ahead and wrap this. We'll see
Well-
everybody next month.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in and staying with us, and have a good night, everybody.
Okay, we're clear.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I never got the